the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
He had 100-plus tackles. He was the first Vols player to have 100-plus tackles since 2015 when he did it. Like, he's a little bit of a machine.
Jalen Reeves-Maben, 2015?
Ooh, it's a good call.
I would think. Because AJ Johnson, I think, was already gone. I think 2014 was his last year.
I don't have it in front of me, but that would make sense. Caleb, final thing here, and we'll wrap up. The most intriguing player on the defensive line for UT next season is who for you?
It's got to be Joshua Josephs because, you have James Pierce leaving. So I feel like that's kind of the gimme answer, cop out. So I definitely think he's waited his turn, which I think Tennessee fans really appreciate that, especially after, the whole turnover and half the team leaving when Heupel got here. Joshua Josephs is the guy who's waited his turn, 9 tackles for loss last year. With James Pierce gone, there's going to be a hole to fill for pass rushing. And I mean, even last year when James Pierce wasn't playing his best, teams are still scheming, to slide offensive linemen to help out. So I think Joshua Josephs is my cop-out answer. Just he'll be the guy you see kind of have an impact. And then maybe a Jackson Moy, a former Pac-12 guy, rest in peace to the Pac-12. He's back this year, interior lineman. Once again, you lose Amari Thomas. That interior line needs a guy to step up. I think he can be that guy. And I think I'll be curious to see what he does. So those would be my two outside of any freshmen. But in years past, we haven't really seen freshmen play that much for Rodney Garner because there's so many guys in the room. And with the rotations, I think everybody will get their reps. But I'll go Joshua Joseph's my cop-out answer. And then Jackson Moy on the interior, I'm curious to see what he can do. And there's still guys, floating around who we haven't seen, like a Jamal Wallace, who was taking heads off in JUCO. He's still on the roster. So we'll see if maybe one of those guys could step up and be a wild card.
I think, Ryan, Joseph's is it's an obvious answer, but it's also an incredibly important one because you're losing real production with Pierce and Omar Norman-Lott, both on the interior and on the edge, both guys who are playing important third down snaps for you. Like, Joshua Josephs has to have a big year for Tennessee's defensive line to keep up what they've been able to do the last 2 years. It can't all fall on Joshua Josephs, but in year 4, it's time for him to have that kind of breakout high sack number type of year. And we haven't seen that at this point. He has talent, but there's a lot on Joshua Joseph's plate for this defense this year. I think Tyre West, to me, is right in that mold, Ryan, because I think Dominic Bailey, it doesn't matter all that much because Tennessee, Rodney Garner specifically, rotates so much across the defensive line. It really doesn't matter who starts, but it does. Tyre West kind of came on a little bit last year and he showed flashes. He has the highest upside, I think, in 25 at strong side defenseman. Weathersby, I think, is kind of a ultimate wild card. He was impressing. I remember it was a year and a half ago now before his injury. And last year was a lost year for him, but he's a super talented guy as well. But I think it's Tyre West to me. If Tyre pops on the opposite side of Joshua Joseph, that goes a long way for Tennessee because Caleb, you brought up that these long-term guys who've been in Gardner's system for a while. That's one of the other things about fans. Everyone's just kind of burnt out. Oh, what's the point of keeping up recruiting anymore? High school recruiting. It's just everybody leaves. Look at Tennessee's roster right now. That's not true. A lot of it, it's still incredibly important, and Tennessee's still building through the high school ranks. High school recruiting is still paramount to this team's success and where they ultimately go. But Tyre West and Joshua Joseph are great examples of that. They've both been in this program for 4 years. And I think West is someone that is kind of overlooked on the opposite side to me, that I think they really kind of sneaky need West to have a breakout and surpass Dominic Bailey in that starting group.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. West was going to be one of the guys I mentioned. I almost weirdly think there isn't as much pressure on Josh Josephs for the team. So I think it just needs to be one of the guys in that spot. It could be Caleb Herring. It could be Jordan Ross. Someone has to emerge. And I think at the very base, you have a really high floor. Like we saw last year, even though the sack numbers weren't there, Josh Josephs was a good player.
Yeah.
So if somebody else takes that step as a more lead pass rush guy, it wouldn't be the end of the world. I think you still would point to Josh Joseph as the guy you would hope it would be because he's the senior. He's the guy who has been an effective player. But yeah, I like Tyre West. I like Davian Hobbs too. I mean, he's a really talented guy who has at times flashed. But I would almost, I don't know. I was going to have a take. I don't know how convicted I am to it. But I would say Davian Hobbs and Jackson Moy are low-key two of the more important players for Tennessee's season because they were the third defense tackles last year, third string defense tackles last year. And I'm not saying it was all their fault, but when Tennessee did go 3 deep, that was the group that kind of did get run on. Like there were a lot of games. The only time Tennessee gave up rushing yards was within the third team defense line was in. Both still young players, but like those are going to be 2 of the top 3 defense tackles in a room that's sneaky, I think, a little bit thin. So I think that both those guys are super important, and I may be a little bit higher on Hobbs' ceiling than I am Moy.
And you also have to appreciate with David Hobbs, both maybe a knock and a plus, is he came in as a linebacker and got moved to the interior defensive line. So he's still kind of learning as they go with that group. And I think, like you mentioned, those guys are going to be big because if Tennessee's offense isn't going to be up to par, you can't let teams run the ball on you and control the clock like they already want to do, because we've seen what happens when Tennessee goes 3 and out in 20 seconds and a team can hold the ball and go, 7 minutes down the field. I think Jordan Ross was a good shout. I should have mentioned him. Schumpert, that was a good one. He was the number one, speaking of high school recruiting, he was the number 1 edge rusher a couple of years ago, and he's going to be a sophomore now. But he's a guy, when you walk into the practice facility or see him get off the bus, he jumps off the page at 6'5". His wingspan is insane. So that's a guy who's got length coming off the edge that I think could be big for this group and be kind of a youthful spark, because I think, kind of to Shumpert's point too, last year you were subbing out seniors for other seniors. This year, when you get past that first group, you're going to be starting to dip into some of those sophomores and those juniors that you've been recruiting and kind of sat a lot last year that now, what are they made of? And it'll be their first test.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.